Now will the members of the board, senior staff, and members of the audience please introduce yourself. Members of the audience, this is not mandatory, it's voluntary. We'd just like to know who you are if you feel like sharing that. Starting with Steve.
Steve Sands, Registrar.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Legislation.
Always about you, Laura.
Dave Diaz, member of the board.
Paul Schifino, board member.
Nancy Springer, board member.
Bob Lamb, board member.
Pastor Herrera, board member.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
Bruce Russ, board member.
Kurt Hepler, Senior Staff Counsel.
David Fote, Chief of Enforcement.
Augie Beltran, Board Member.
Kevin Albanese, board member.
John O'Rourke, board member.
Karen Robinson, Chief of Licensing.
Frank Shutter, Board Member.
Linda Clifford, board member.
Cindy Christensen, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Ed Lang, board member.
Joan Hancock, board member. Starting with you, Aaron.
Aaron Eckert, Executive Assistant.
Thomas O'Hare, Public Affairs for the Contractor Board.
Sue Gaffney from Theaters of San Diego Center for Public Interest Law. Corinne Fishman, DCA, Board of Bureau Relations. In the back, please.
In the back, please.
Leanne Dunn, Contractor State License Board. Lisa Smith, Contractor State License Board. Nicole Ricks, Contractor State License Board.
Phil Vermeulen.
Rick Pierce, Basic Crafts.
Tony Marchetti.
Matt Kelly.
Who?
Emily Cohen, United Contractors. Christina Dell, Deputy Chief, Enforcement Division.
Joe Upchurch, District Council 16.
Richard Marcus of the Pacific Advocacy Group.
Thank you all. Now we'd like to introduce our newest board member, Augie Beltran. And Augie, wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from and your history.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Look forward to working with this board. I have served on numerous boards over the years, including Lathrop City Council and the Delta Protection Commission. I started out serving in the United States Marine Corps as a reservist, and I've worked as a carpenter for the past 25 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Augie. Augie replaces our outgoing member, Matt Kelly, and we are this morning happy to recognize Matt. Wave your hand, stand up, Matt. And please come forward. On Matt's behalf. So up at the top it says California Senate Resolution by the Honorable Darrell Steinberg, President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, relative to commending Matthew Kelly. Whereas Matthew Kelly is completing his term on the Contractor State License Board after 10 years of dedicated service, and in recognition of the valuable leadership he provided to the public, to that organization during his tenure and his exemplary record and civic leadership, he is deserving of special public commendations. And whereas a longtime resident of Sacramento, Matt Kelly was appointed to the Contractor State License Board by the Senate Rules Committee in 2003 and has since served 3 faithful terms that included reappointments in 2005 and 2009 as a public member. And whereas Matt Kelly brings credit and distinction to himself as the longest serving Contractor State License Board member to date, and whereas a leader in every sense of the word, Matt Kelly lent his leadership and expertise to the Contractor State License Board as secretary from 2004 to 2005, vice chair from 2005 to 2006, board chair from 2006 to 2007, and he also contributed to the organization's mission through his service as both a member and chair of its enforcement, legislative, and executive committees. And whereas Matt Kelly has been a committed supporter of Contractor State License Board staff, attended undercover sting operations and senior scam stopper seminars, and often provided victuals and other contributions. And whereas as an accomplished veteran in the construction industry, Matthew Kelly began as a carpenter apprentice and has served more than 20 years of work experience. He has worked on a variety of commercial and residential projects and has served as executive director of the Building Trades Council. Got to take a break here. And whereas beyond his professional affiliations, Matthew Kelly has devoted his time and efforts to serving as the director of District 7 Sacramento Metropolitan Fire Board since 2004 and has held leadership positions with Weave, the Roberts Family Development Center, and Workforce Investment Board. Whereas in his personal life, Matthew Kelly has spent countless hours on countless golf courses without improving his game, leaving countless golf balls for others to find. And whereas over the course of his service with the Contractor State License Board, Matthew Kelly has consistently served the interests of California consumers while helping to enhance professionalism in the construction industry. Now therefore, be it resolved by President Pro Tempore of the California State Senate, Darrell Steinberg, that Matthew Kelly be honored on his exemplary record of leadership as a member of the Contractor State License Board, applauded on his outstanding display of business and civic leadership, and extended sincere best wishes for continued success in the future.
Thank you
So
very
well
much.
described.
And with the registrar, please.
And with my glasses off.
Thanks. Thank you, Steve.
I'm not sure what more can be said to add to that. I was thinking about it last night, and I'm sure it said it, but one of the things that I also noticed about Matt Kelly, and I know all the board members would agree, is his commitment to the employees at the Contractors Board, and over all of these years, constantly taking his time to attend almost every board function that there was to, support the morale of the employees, and thank you for that, Matt. All right, next, in January, we were honored by the Association of Assemblyperson Mariko Yamada at our 300th Senior Scam Stopper in Woodland. And she brought with her this plaque to be given to the Contractors License Board, honoring us for this 300th anniversary date. So I'm going to pass this around and move on with the agenda, but it was, she heads the Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care, and she's really invested in the same issues that we are about protecting the consumers. So it was a really great event, well attended, and want to thank the public affairs staff for doing such a good job putting that on. So we pass that around. Where's my script? All right, next we have a special recognition this morning for the Greenworks U.S. Work that was done by our staff, and hopefully most of you have viewed the media coverage resulting from CSLB's investigation of Greenworks. You'll hear a little bit more about that in the audience if you're not familiar, but it is in the packet. The investigation is ongoing, so we're limiting our discussion today to highlights that have appeared in the statewide media coverage. On February 6, CSLB staff and law enforcement partners served a location search warrant on multiple locations. Computers and business records were seized. As depicted by media coverage, it is alleged Greenworks US employed more than 100 telemarketers to sell walk-in tubs to the elderly, with an initial contract target price of up to $22,000. Unfortunately, the allegations include contracting for tubs not approved for installation in California. Further, CSLB's administrative investigation alleges false advertising and that many of these tubs pose a safety hazard to the user. When CSLB began receiving complaints against Greenworks US, it became apparent that Greenworks' business model was very sophisticated, and the investigation would require highly skilled staff with patience, motivation, and a commitment to consumer protection. When it became known a task force would be required to investigate the numerous complaints received, staff did not need to be directed to work the task force, nor was it necessary to ask for volunteers. Three of CSLB's finest investigators asked to be assigned to the task force and take on the challenge. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the three investigators and the expertise they brought to the team. I'm going to ask Leanne Young, Nicole Ricks, and Nisa Smith to stand and come on up here. Leanne, Nicole, and Nisa. Am I doing it from here?
Stand up. Can you read? Yeah. I'll hand it to you.
So Leanne, hi Leanne. Come on over here. Actually, come here. Let me show you in the middle. Leanne is a senior investigator based out of our Santa Rosa office and took the lead on the investigation of Bay Area complaints. In addition, Leanne is recognized as one of CSLB's best writers and researchers. Congratulations. Nicole Ricks. Nicole Ricks is a senior investigator assigned to our Sacramento office and took on the lead of Valley Complaints. Recognized as an excellent interviewer, Nicole was instrumental in identifying victims and interviewing Greenworks US associates. Congratulations. You want to open your, all right. Third, Nisa Smith. Hi, Nisa. Nisa, a tenacious investigator. Nisa assumed the role as team leader and lived up to her reputation as an investigator that will go the extra mile for evidence. If that requires a search dumpsters, good. Then so be it. Nisa performed investigation of Southern California complaints and perhaps most importantly was the CSLB liaison to local prosecutors. When the prosecutor was asked how the investigation was proceeding, he responded, "We're just riding in Nisa's wake." Nisa really stepped up to the plate as lead investigator and did a phenomenal job by interviewing victims, getting the prosecutor on board, assisting with obtaining the search warrant, and helping to coordinate and execute the search warrant with the various law enforcement agencies. So it is now my honor to recognize these three investigators for their outstanding consumer protection efforts. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Okay. All right, that concludes my remarks. Are there any any comments from any other board members at this time? Board members?
I have one question. When
Yes,
this,
Mr. Lamb.
This, the tub investigation, when is that going to be released to the public? I think the public needs to know as soon as we can do that.
I think
so other
Dave
people aren't made
is
victims.
here to answer that question.
Well, we are working with the media now, so there are elements of it that can be disclosed. Rick Lopes has taken the lead on working with television stations. And Rick, would you want to comment on anything else we may be doing? I mean, there's certain information. We had a conference call with the Attorney General's office that can be released, and Rick is releasing.
Yeah, we've given out a lot of the information that you used in the presentation. We have had some potential victims that have contacted the media, and they have gotten them in touch with us and with NISA, and they filed complaints now. So we're hoping that we'll actually continue to have more victims coming forward. Then we'll see how the prosecution develops, and then we'll respond accordingly and making that information public as that is warranted.
Satisfied? Anything else, Bob?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Agenda C. Unless there are any other board member comments, board members? Now, public comment, Agenda Item C. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the board cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on the item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual. Any individuals who wish to address the board at this time? Mr. Kelly. Please introduce
I promise I will
yourself.
not take 5 minutes, but I did want to tell you all thank you very much for the recognition I received this morning. I appreciate your taking your time to read the entire resolution. And my tenure on the board has been an absolute pleasure. For somebody that started in the construction industry and as an apprentice carpenter, to be able to be part of an organization that regulates an industry that's been so important to myself and so many of the people that I know has been one that I'll look back on very fondly. I've worked and met some very interesting people at the top of their game, the top of their fields in this industry that have sat on this board, and the friendships that I've gained while I've been on this board are ones that I will treasure. It's always been a pleasure to work with such a high-performing staff. Seeing the times that I was on the board when the economy was going down and the board lost revenue and was continued to ask or expected to do the board or the organization was expected to do the same job that they always had done. And they always pulled together and were able to do things with less resources, and I think it just goes and shows you the quality of the people that work for this organization and the quality of the people that are leading this organization. So again, all of you, board members, staff, I appreciate the time that I've been able to spend with you. Board members, enjoy your time while you're here because it should be enjoyable for you. So thank you again, everybody. It was very nice to be recognized this morning, and I'll see you again, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment this morning? All right, we'll move to Agenda Item D, which is the review and approval of the December 10th, 2013 board meeting minutes. Do any board members have comments regarding minutes from the last meeting in December? Any public comment on our December meeting? I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the December 10, 2013 board meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the 12/10/13 board meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Agenda Item E, the Enforcement Committee report. Ed Lang and Dave Fote will give us the Enforcement Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we begin the enforcement update, I'd like to brief the board on some of the recent enforcement activities. Last week, several CSLB investigators assisted the Riverside and Contra Costa district attorneys' offices in serving a local, on location searching of a warrant of Greenworks US at multiple locations throughout the state. The search warrant was the results of a comprehensive CSLB investigation performed by lead investigator Nisa Smith with assistance from Leanne Young and Nicole Rick, as you recently heard that they, and saw that they received their certificate. Greenworks US allegedly contracted for the installation of walk-in tubs that were not permitted or authorized for use in California. Greenworks US is known for television commercials featuring various celebrities pitching their walk-in tubs, especially to seniors. The operation received lots of media coverage and is a testament of the hard work and dedication of the enforcement staff, and we commend them tremendously. We would also like to report, as you may recall, as part of the 2013-14 strategic plan, the Enforcement Division committed to hiring investigators to remote geographical locations. We are proud to announce that we are recently hired 1 full-time staff and 2 retired annuitants who have been assigned to investigate cases in St. Louis Obispo, Butte County, and Stanislaus County. We hope that this will discourage unlicensed activity in these locations, and we'll continue to look at other remote areas that would benefit from having an investigator assigned to that county. We also are delighted to inform you that the budget change proposal to expand enforcement subsequent arrest unit was approved and included in the governor's 2014 and 15 proposed budget. That's a big plus for us. We received approval to hire 3 enforcement representatives and 1 clerical support. Management is currently working on getting these positions filled as soon as possible. Now we'll move into agenda item E1, Enforcement Program Update, and Dave Folk of the Enforcement Division will provide the update for this.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. If we could turn to the first page, it's got intake mediation centers at the top. I'd like to just to report on the success that we've had in 2013 in focusing on early intervention to help licensees resolve complaints with their customers. You'll see at the top of the page that the training that we provide our staff has proven beneficial, that we have a 20% increase in restitution paid to injured parties, well over $8 million paid out last year. The second highlight regarding the kitchen remodel, it's an example of what can happen and how we can intervene and help keep these parties out of court. What we find is when they are forced to resolve their differences civilly, the legal fees can be $30,000 to $40,000. So much more effective if through mediation you can resolve it and the parties can move on. The third highlight is regarding an HVAC contractor that took $11,000 and that's a concern when $11,000 is taken up front. Often the work isn't done. We have contractors targeting elderly and other consumers that are being taken advantage of, and this is one of the areas that we're directing our peace officers to focus. We've recently had meetings with our peace officers, and we're identifying 5 of them to focus solely on elder abuse and predatory contractors, either service and repair or others, that are taking money and often not performing any services. On page 2, we have a highlight regarding our outreach to PG&E. There's a requirement that when you dig, you're supposed to call to make sure you don't hit an electrical or a gas line. Unfortunately, we became aware that many of our contractors were not making that phone call. That jeopardizes public safety and certainly worker safety. We've met with PG&E and worked out a protocol for them to make referrals through that referral program, and also our outreach, our publications to educate our licensees in many ways through our partnerships with the utilities. We've enjoyed, well, they've reported to us, I should say, 130% increase in calling before contractors dig. And so our strategy of educating and then warning and issuing citations has proven successful. On page 3, we're I'm providing an update on our permit enforcement program. I'd like to thank Rick Lopes and his staff for all of the publications that they have developed and distributed to educate consumers, industry, and other government agencies on the need to comply with permit requirements. On page 5, you'll see that our complaint form that we developed approximately a year ago has proven very successful. You'll look at the jump in building department complaints received since 2012. That's when the new complaint form was rolled out. That from that point forward, we've received 602 complaints. This allows contractors and the public to file anonymously that work has been or is being performed by someone without a permit in place. And on the following page, we have our statistics on page 6 regarding the legal actions that were issued, and you'll see that 262 citations were issued during that period as standalone charges. Now, the way this program works, we don't want to cite the contractor if we don't have to. We want the contractor to obtain a building permit and to assure us that in the future they will comply with permit requirements. The contractor is also required to do any work that is necessary to comply with the code requirements at that contractor's expense. So not only we issue the citations, but it's proven to be a very effective tool in achieving a settlement for a consumer and permit compliance. On page 6 and 7, we're providing a few highlights regarding our HVAC inspection program. We've talked about this before. It's something that we're going to be rolling out in Santa Clara County in the next couple of months. We did start this program approximately 2 months ago by sending letters out to all of the heating and air conditioning contractors that had an exemption on file. There were 240 contractors out of approximately 500 that are showing an exemption from workers' comp, and it's our belief that majority of that work requires employee labor, and so they need to get a workers' comp policy. One component of this will be an outreach program, and with many outreach programs, if you want to get media radio, you need to have a funding source. I want to thank Board Member Nancy Springer for inviting me to a meeting last week where I made a very important contact with a gentleman from the Bay Area Regional Energy Network that represents the counties in the Bay Area, and he reached out to me after the meeting and indicated that he may have a funding source that could assist us with this. But again, we're going to start in Santa Clara County. We're working with the DA and putting together a meeting where we expect to have 300 or 400 contractors show up, and we're going to talk about how it benefits the public when a permit is obtained and this unit is installed appropriately. In fact, there's a 300% return on investment. We're looking at an ambassador program at the point of sale where they can educate the customer, but also tying in the workers' comp violations that are occurring with many of these contractors is a tool for the DA to play a part in this. So we're really excited about it. Our kickoff date is March of this year. On pages 8, 9, and 10, I've provided some highlights of some cases that are, 3 cases that are pending that have been referred or we're working with the DA on. We'll be reporting more on those down the road. On page 11, we have our general complaint handling statistics. I want to mention that the staff are continuing to achieve the board goals for production and cycle times. Again, the goal being for the investigators to be averaging, it's a weighted average of 10 closures per investigator. We want to be handling the cases at the Intake Mediation Center within 60 days, and we don't want cases to go over 270 days in age before appropriate disposition is reached. At the top of the complaint, the top of the page, you'll see that our optimum caseload would be 2,905 cases. We're below that at 2,889, so we're right there where we want to be. And on page 13, we have a highlight for 2013 regarding the work that our SWIFT unit has done, our proactive team. They've had, in many ways, a record year, conducting 320 sting and sweep they conducted sting and sweep operations on 320 days, resulting in 1,624 legal actions. And it really attests to the partnership that they've developed with local DAs and local law enforcement, Department of Insurance, and others to make that happen. On page 14, at the bottom of the page, we have an update on our Big Sur fire response and the work that we're doing with Senator Bill Monning. The staff wanted me to point out, though, that they're also actively conducting stings targeting unlicensed contractors that are performing landscaping work, and this is in response to the drought California is experiencing. On page 15, we have a news release, and this is one of the strategies that we've been implementing. Often, we will make a referral to the DA, and there could be a large consumer harm that has occurred, and we won't always get the outcome we want. But if you can tie in additional violations, such as workers' comp or false use of a license number, you can achieve a significant criminal sentence. And this is a good example of that. Slovakia Fali was an unlicensed contractor that was convicted of contracting without license. He was sentenced to 60 days home confinement, but as part of that, placed on probation, he cannot continue to go out and violate the law. Well, as many of them do, he went out and continued to violate the law. And he did that by using somebody else's license number, which can be charged as a felony, but also by failing to provide workers' compensation insurance for his employees. And you'll see that when this case, when he was sentenced, he was given 6 months for the prior probation violations and 6 months for the new conviction. He was taken into custody in the courtroom. He's currently serving 365 days in jail. So we just want to really applaud Monterey County. I know that the board has previously recognized the DA, Dean Flippo, for his proactive stance and in working with us to look at construction-related violations. On pages 16, 17, 18, and 19, we have a summary of all of the training that we provided to staff, and I want to relay from our staff to you, to the board members, that they appreciate you taking an interest in them and making this one of our objectives, and it's played out very well. Registrar Steve Sands has suggested that we may want to look towards developing our own enforcement academy, and so our primary instructors are Mike Franklin and Doug Galbraith, and they're looking at that now as to the modules. We've already put modules in place, and they're summarized in this update. But can we expand upon that to provide even more structured training for new employees and also existing employees? We think we can, so we're really excited to take on that challenge. And that concludes the enforcement update.
Thank you, Dave, for that. Are there any comments from our board members or the general public? Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Chair. Congratulations on the building permit enforcement program. That's really, I think, a showcase for the board, and I thank you for sharing it with us. I just had a question, and I guess it was, I was reading an article in the LA Times last week concerning the solar industry and the contractors involved with that. And I had two questions. One is, are HVAC contractors the only ones that have this issue of not obtaining building permits? That was the first question. And the other question that I had, due to the article in the LA Times, which said that just in LA City, for example, the increase in solar permits, I guess, if that's what you call it, or applications to the city, jumped from 2010, 1,900 permits, 2013 to 4,200. So, and one of the issues that they raised in the article was that there's such a bureaucratic maze that residents have to go through, that I was thinking whether one of those mazes is that maybe contractors decide not to get a building permit to avoid that process. So I guess my question is HVAC contractors the only ones with this issue, or are there other licensed occupations that also have this issue that do not get building permits?
Well, the HVAC issue is probably the most extreme example. David Diaz has provided information that approximately 400,000 units were sold and only 5% were permitted. And it's an interesting industry to look at, because you can tie in the loss of return on investment on the utility bill by not installing it right. And so that's a real hook to work with consumers. but that's not the only trade that has permit avoidance. There's water heaters, there's a lot of other work that does get done without permits. In working with building officials throughout the state, I have observed that some of them have taken a proactive approach to making it easier to obtain a permit. Some jurisdictions allow you to obtain a permit online. Some are talking about self-permitting for like a water heater as an example. That's another installation that is typically done without a building permit. But I would ask our building official representative to maybe comment on that. Nancy?
Sure. Nancy Springer. That's correct, echo what Dave says there. It's not just the HVAC that is the most common one, the one that's mostly out there known, but it is sometimes water heater permits, re-roof permits. Building officials are working together to come up with what Dave mentioned, a recertification program. Some jurisdictions are trying to set it up to where you can self-certify. A contractor comes in and applies for this program, and then they do so many inspections, and then they work with the agency, and they can do it that way. Online permits is another way to do it, same with photovoltaic. If they meet a standard design and requirements, then they can do that online, and we see a better turnover of permits using that. It varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'd be willing to do a survey and find out where that is and get that information back to Dave. So.
The reason I surfaced it, because it appears from this article in the Times that the solar industry is really taking off. And now with the governor really saying that 30% of energy has to come from another natural source, or whatever he's called it. But I think that's going to be something that maybe will be on the radar screen as an issue down the road. That's why I brought it up.
Well, it'd be our pleasure to work with Nancy Springer and looking at the solar industry and what we can do to help.
See if there's an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions and responses. I'm sure the Enforcement Committee will be looking into those comments in the future. Any other comments from the board or the public? Yes, go ahead.
I've got one, Ed. I'd like to ask that the Enforcement Committee put on its agenda to discuss basically warranties. We were talking about the solar industry here just a second ago. They require, if you get a subsidy, a 10-year warranty, and there seems to be a pretty good turnover. And so how is the public being protected, not only for the fact that the maybe contractor owner received a subsidy, but how is this warranty thing playing out? It's a lot of extended warranties for HVAC systems, roofing. The contractors are here and gone, and how is the public being protected as warranties? I think it's worth the discussion. I don't know what the answer is, but at least we should have the discussion. So I'd like to get that on the agenda for the next enforcement meeting.
Okay. Thank you for your comments on that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, go ahead.
One question with respect to the 400,000 HVAC units. Do we work as a board with our licensees, predominantly Home Depot, Lowe's, to track and monitor where these units are being, to whom these units are being sold to, and if they're licensed contractors, permits, et cetera?
Yes, Dave, would you comment on that?
Yeah, we're real excited about a meeting on Thursday of this week where we're going to be meeting with the manufacturers, distributors, the Energy Commission, and other partners to look at serial number tracking. So there could be a database that would be at the Energy Commission where you would know where the units are, who they're being sold to, and then ideally where they're being distributed to for installation. So that's being looked at. Again, there's a meeting on Thursday, and we're optimistic we'll have a solution.
Good, good. Thank you for those questions. Any more questions from the board? What about the general public? Let's move to the next item, Agenda E3, update on electrical certification enforcement policy. I'll ask Registrar Steve Sand to comment on this item.
We have no update.
Thank you for that quick report. Are there any comments from the board or the general public?
Some more detail on that?
Yeah, the board had been asked to look into the enforcement of electrical certification program, and we've been told that the DIR, the labor agency, is looking at it and will be coming out with a finding which should guide the board in the future, but we're waiting for DIR to come out with that finding. And as soon as we get it, we'll share it with the board, and hopefully, we should have it by the next board meeting.
Did that answer your question? Okay.
thank you.
Oh, thank you. Are there any other comments on this item from the board members or the general public? Okay, seeing and hearing none, Madam Chair, that ends the Enforcement Committee report.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move to agenda item F, Public Affairs Committee report. Rick Lopes, Pastor Herrera Jr. will give us this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going to give you a couple of highlights here on the Public Affairs program, and Rick Lopes will give you the more detailed contents of this report that he prepared. There's many items here. Some are issues or reporting aspects that we talked about last time, but I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of things, and one is the website redesign that I guess it's coming really along very, very well, and hopefully soon, probably sometime in spring, we'll have a new website, the Contractor State License Board, and it's really going to be a really user-friendly one that really will, I think everyone will be pleased with that. So we're looking forward to that website redesign. You may want to also take a look at the active most wanted list, see if you recognize any of the worst unlicensed violators. I'm sure that would be a great help to Dave and his enforcement to help out with his investigations, that you never know that you may want to, you'll recognize one of the most wanted there. Also, I was glad to see that the Public Affairs Unit is really developing some materials on the issue of the drought, some information on landscaping to assist homeowners as far as what kind of tips they should have in looking for doing some re-landscaping, and of course looking for a good contractor. And again, it's been mentioned already about the 300th Senior Scam Stopper, and it's continuing to go. And encourage any of the board members that if they wish to attend any of them, it's a really worthwhile experience, and Jane really appreciates a board member there. And plus, it's an opportunity to not only meet the staff of the state legislator, but also maybe the state legislator, him or herself. It's always good to have a contact there. So, Rick, do you want to take it from there?
Great, thank you. You covered a lot of the main points, so I'll go through and happy to answer any questions as we go along. As Pastor did mention, the website redesign project is well underway. A lot of help and really driving it is our IT department. And we're about 90% complete. We're going through our final copy edits and navigation things, and we'll have some staff within the board that will be doing some testing and trying to look for kinks or problems. And then, again, we hope to launch this spring. One of the things that at the top of page 2 is, as Pastor mentioned, about the most wanted. One of the things that we always like to hear about, because we believe in public affairs that our work is helping protect consumers, but it's nice when we actually hear concrete cases of it. And with one of our most wanted, a guy named Alex Pike Mitchell, who was arrested in San Diego. I think we've talked about him in previous meetings. When after he was on our most wanted in San Diego, he went up to Santa Cruz County, and we started getting complaints from that area. People were finding him on our website. Well, he has now pled guilty to charges in both counties, and as he is awaiting sentencing, he continues to work in the San Diego area. And as you see in what we wrote up there on the top of page 2, as Mitchell was working at an elderly gentleman's house in, I believe it was in El Cajon near San Diego. The neighbor is talking to the homeowner, the elderly homeowner, and they're talking about it. And so the neighbor goes and looks up this guy, Alex Pike Mitchell, on the internet, and lo and behold, he finds our most wanted page. So he comes out, he tells the elderly man that, and the elderly man proceeds to immediately fire him and tell him to leave his property. Unfortunately, he didn't pay him any money. So again, we believe that the work we're doing is helping protect people, but it is nice to hear when we actually have a concrete example of somebody who was saved by the work that we're doing. Also on page 2, just the update on our application instructional video. Our online videos is still available. The viewership numbers are going up. The application rejection rate, though, is still bouncing around. So we thought this would be something that would really be helpful for applicants. And so we're going to continue to look for ways that we can encourage people before they apply for a license to look at this video, because we're still seeing the rejection rates bouncing around. As we go through page 3 and 4, as you see some of our social media efforts on Twitter and Facebook, our likes and follows continues to grow at a relatively steady pace. We're finding that our mentions of sting operations are the ones that drive the most traffic. As far as our video and digital services on page 4, as we're seeing, our meeting is being streamed again here. We did the meeting in Southern California in December, and that leads into the YouTubes. Our number of videos continues to go up in all of our meetings, and everything is available on our YouTube page, so it's all archived. As we move to page 5, it's just the update on our email alerts, which do continue a steady growth. And so we've now got we got 559 over 100,000 that are in our database of emails for anything from meeting notices to our press releases to our newsletters. On page 6 is our media relations work. And one of the most interesting things, and I think long-term is going to be really one of the ways that the board's really going to benefit is because of technology, and we're seeing it by the web streaming. The other huge way we're seeing it is by it enables us, especially with broadcast and television, especially media, is where in the past, if we were going to have a case like, let's say this Alex Mitchell case out of San Diego, or a case of another one we worked on recently of a guy who used to be licensed in California but was actually working up in Oregon. We are now, because of technology, able to do video interviews with TV stations and other places without having to be there. In the past, we'd have to worry about going to a TV studio and using a satellite uplink with quite a bit of expense and resources. Now we can set up our camera in our offices, we can do an interview, and then we can take that file and we can just upload it to the internet, and the station on the other side can download it. So just in the past few weeks, we were able to not only do it with a TV station in Portland, but also the Greenworks story, which we talked about the day that the search warrant was served here in the Bay Area. We were able to do an interview and get our messages out to a TV station down here in San Francisco that was doing the story. So where in the past this was a hugely expensive and time-consuming thing, not only for the media but for us, we're able to actually do this pretty well. And I think as time goes on, that's going to be an incredibly valuable resource for us to get our messages out. As you see in the news releases, the one key thing that we're finding out, and not surprisingly, is we did one of our press releases in a sting operation we had in the Sacramento area. One of the things is they looked for landscapers, and they tried to come in and tell them they wanted to take out their current landscaping and replace it with drought-tolerant things. And the word drought, once that made it into our press release, I'm not sure in my 9 years here that I've ever seen a press release take off like that one. So the drought certainly is a top-of-mind thing, and we are working with our other divisions to take a look at the possible effects on the industry and our work. And so that's something that's going to be a real top-of-mind thing in the weeks and months ahead, unless it starts raining again soon. On page 7, the industry bulletins, the one we wanted to especially notice is the one we did on January the 17th, clarifying the new laws about the replacement of plumbing fixtures. There's been a lot of talk in the industry about how this was going to affect, and so we've helped as best we can is kind of clear up what our feelings and also CalBO, the building officials, are about how the new laws are going to be implemented. As you move on to page 8 in the publication highlights, the board members will note that in front of them there is a big paperweight, also known as our 2014 law book. It's just arrived from the printers the end of last week, and so we provided you with your copies there. If you'd prefer that we'd ship it with you, if you don't want to weigh down your airplane, just let us know and we'll ship it to you instead. But the 2014 law book is now complete, and we'll also later in the meeting be discussing the accomplishments report and the board members' administrative procedure manual, which have been 2 other publications that we've just updated. The senior scam stoppers, on to page 8 and 9. You've heard already a little bit about our 300th one. we have 2 of them taking place tomorrow in Southern California, one in Manhattan Beach, the other in Burbank. And then on Friday, Jane hops on a plane and then she'll be up in Salinas. And so she's, as you can see, the upcoming schedule, again, we would encourage any board members, if there's any of these taking place in your area, or if you have an interest of attending, just get in touch with us and we'll put you in touch with Jane, and we'd be happy to have you join us. And with that, that completes our report.
Thank you, Rick. I'm so happy that Steve and your staff and Rick are really on the cutting edge of media technology here with everything that you're doing and the good work that's going on here. And of course, thank you for the law book. We appreciate that. We can take that home and read it, I'm sure. Any comments from the board or the public on the report? See none. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that report. Next is agenda item G, the Legislative Committee report, and Paul Schaffino, our committee chair, and Ledge Chief Laura Zuniga will provide this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As usual, Laura and I will present this together. We haven't met since the last committee meeting. Laura's included in the package under item, the blue item, which is a legislative calendar for the year, which is I found it interesting because I'd never had the calendar put in front of me like this. But it starts on the second, on the back side is January, and then on the front side is June, July, and August. Now, what we did last time is we approved 4 items for legislative proposals, and they're reiterated here. And since we haven't met, I actually have a couple comments, questions as we go through it. And board members, please ask questions as we go, because to me, as an attorney, I still find some of this confusing as we revisit it months later. Item number 1 was the notice to appear proposal. And I guess we had some language that we were proposing that then ended up being revised. Is that what ended up happening with this, Laura?
It was revised after reviewing it with our Deputy Attorney General and with Dave Moat and with Kurt Hepler. We made some changes and think that this language will achieve our final goal.
Now, in the original, when we were looking at this, under 7011.4, there's language to a separate enforcement division which shall rigorously enforce this chapter, and we were going to take out the word separate, weren't we? And then that got dropped?
We were previously going to take out separate, and then we did meet with the Department of Consumer Affairs as well to discuss this, and we decided to keep the word separate in case, just to make it clear that we have the unit that's focused on unlicensed activity, in case there are any questions at a later date, and then make the change to B to achieve our objective.
Okay, and then the language in item B below, to me, just appears to be a rewording of the same thing, which says that our enforcement representatives now will have the authority to issue a notice to appear. Is that correct?
Right, so we're taking out division and replacing it with the Contractor State License Board to make it clear that all enforcement representatives have this authority, and then just rewording existing law to make it more clear.
Okay, and it's a notice to appear in front of who?
The notice to appear is to appear in court, correct, David?
Yeah, it's a written notice to appear in criminal court for unlicensed contracting activity.
Okay, so it's a criminal deal. I was just trying to find out.
That's
if it was-
correct.
Okay.
It's criminal misdemeanor.
Okay. Any questions from board members or the public with regard to the first item? So there's no need for a motion on this then, because we've really already done that in the last committee meeting, or the last board meeting. Item number 2 was the issue regarding advertisements, which the board authorized me to approve final language. Dave, I think this comes back to you a little bit, maybe to Laura. What we wanted to do is cover unlicensed contractors advertising. It was the bathroom and kitchen remodel advertisements from unlicensed contractors. So there's a $500 limit, but they would be advertising to redo someone's kitchen, which obviously would be more than that. So we want to include by statute something that says in their advertising that they need to somehow limit the advertisement so that the aggregate contract price won't exceed the $500 limit. Fair summary, Dave, Laura?
Yes, I think when we discussed this proposal at the December meeting, we talked about requiring these unlicensed individuals to add an additional disclosure to their advertisement. And then upon further review, we decided this current language would be more effective.
And Dave, I think you had some input in that. Why, because now we're not requiring any language at all to be added to the advertisement. It looks like we're giving the flexibility to enforcement to look at the advertisements and then decide on their own whether or not it's in excess or of the $500 limit.
Well, we're just wanting it to make it clear that if you advertise for construction, the work has to be, the aggregate total sum of the labor and material has to be less than $500. And if you're gonna advertise for something that would clearly be more, say a kitchen remodel, as you mentioned, that would be an unlawful advertisement, and it would be actionable for us to take action based upon that and call them out to a sting or even do something administratively on the advertisement itself.
Okay. That's what I was looking for. And on that basis, it's fine with me. So we're good to go on that item. Any other questions from the board?
Was this the one that we were talking about, the point, the font point?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
That's correct. This is that one. And what essentially what we're ending up with is what Dave has requested is the authority for the enforcement division to have the flexibility to look at the advertisement, this is the way I interpret it, to look at the advertisement and say, you know, you're well over the $500 limit, so we can just pursue it. We can just decide to do it. We're not gonna limit it to a font size notification-related issue, more a matter of, it doesn't pass the smell test, we can go with it.
So we decided to eliminate that aspect of the proposal?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I'd be concerned, what I liked about the earlier proposal was that we would be really educating the public by explaining to the public what unlicensed means, that they cannot, or they cannot take a contractor to perform work in excess of $500. Is this more of an enforcement deal or a public education deal?
This is gonna be more for enforcement purposes, I would say. I think the concern that later arose with the proposal we discussed in December is that it was unlikely that these unlicensed individuals were gonna add an additional disclosure to their advertisement. So the more requirements we put in, the less likely it seemed that it would be complied with, and we're concerned it wouldn't have the effect that we wanted. So by allowing the enforcement staff to take action just based on the advertisement with this proposal, it'll help with that goal. On public education, you're correct, it isn't necessarily gonna help there. That's something we can look at separately.
I think that the issue, for me anyway, that came up in the public education, if they're unlicensed, they're not looking at this statute anyway. And so the reality is, at the end of the day, it's going to be an ineffectual effort. Where with what we've done here, we've given Dave the authority to just look at it and say, sorry, you don't pass the smell test, we can go after you. Not that that's, and we can go after, under legislative committee meeting, we can go with the education issue as a separate topic. I think it's a great idea. It's just a question, how do you get there to educate the public when these unlicensed guys aren't gonna look at it anyway?
Does it help enforcement, though, by setting a real black and white standard that they have to include whatever language we had talked about including? If they're unlicensed and they don't include it, I mean, you have an automatic violation. I agree, the likelihood of an unlicensed contractor complying with this is about slim and none anyway. Just a thought.
Where we're having a struggle now, and I'll put this out, is Craigslist and media like that, where you can simply put an ad out and you put not licensed and you can build the entire home. And we have to have a tool so we can deal with that administratively without having to call these people out for an undercover operation. So that's really what it gets at. It's gonna get out the most egregious offenders. If you wanna do drain cleaning or something minor, you'll still be able to do it. But if you're gonna build a house, do a room addition, or replumb the house, then that for us is gonna be actionable. We're gonna find out who you are in undercover capacity and be able to deal with it in-house. That's really what we're trying to get at. Be able to take an administrative action, or in some jurisdictions, you'd be able to file criminally for the illegal ad. But with the existing law today, they can legally say they're not licensed, and it's incumbent upon us, without this change, to actually prove that that's a false statement, and that will require that we call them out to undercover operation. for which there's too many people advertising illegally, really, on Craigslist. I went to Bakersfield and I just put in home remodeling, and I found on a Friday afternoon, 17 contractors advertising for home remodeling that said unlicensed.
And on that note, Kevin, at the Ledge Committee meeting, we can bring that up as far as the additional disclosure issue or education issue for the consumer. The third item on here was the referral to the Labor Commissioner, Labor Commissioner's referral to the CSLB, and the requirement that the CSLB take action within a certain number of days, which was not practical. So the language was changed to may, instead of shall pursue a disciplinary action. And that way there's flexibility at the CSLB. We approved that last meeting. There's been no change, twists, or turns. It is what it is, correct, Laura?
Right.
Okay. And then under item 4, this was the evidence fund, and I think this was the one where we were talking about the $200 to pay per house for a sting operation, and we were thinking we needed more money to do it, and was that conversation correct?
Yes, this is the one that came as a result of an audit of the way we pay to acquire evidence, like a sting site. And there was concern that we needed a separate fund for that purpose. We're recommending we not pursue this proposal for this year. It's an issue that affects more programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs, and they're continuing to work on this issue and try to identify a solution. So thought we'd wait and see what comes up for a department-wide solution before we pursue our own.
Okay, so there's no real board action on that item, but are there any questions or from any of the board members of the public? Pastor?
Just, Paul, I just wanted to, I noticed that Senator Ted Lieu is going to be carrying most of our proposals, and, you know, he's going to be running for Congress soon, and, you know, the big seat there, Henry Waxham has retired, so that's going to be a big contest for him to get involved with. I guess I just wanted to let you know that if he may be really busy with his campaign, and I don't know how that might affect or impact the proposals that we have that he's carrying for us. So that's just for your information.
Okay, thank you. It shouldn't impact our proposals. They would be able to continue to go forward. It just may involve more work on staff's part than it might have previously. Thank you.
Okay, the other, no further questions. Then the other item that we have on there's 2 more items to cover. On page 2, there's an introduction to an amendment to 7028, and it looks to me like what we're trying to, and I'm not sure whether or not we need a motion on this issue, but what it looks like is that we're trying to cover suspended licenses similar to how we're handling unlicensed activities in terms of making it a criminal activity to be in the construction business. So if you're unlicensed and you do construction work over $500, it's a misdemeanor. Is that correct, Dave? Yes. Okay. And what we're doing in here is we're trying to suck into it that a suspended license, that is also going to be a misdemeanor as well?
It'll be someone whose license was suspended for not paying taxes or civil judgments.
Okay, so if somebody has a suspended license, they're still allowed to act as a contractor?
Well, unlicensed does not necessarily include someone who has a suspended license.
Correct. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, if somebody has a suspended license and they're engaged in the contracting business, whether it's for one reason or another, if they're suspended, they're suspended. Should they be allowed to be in the contracting business?
They shouldn't be operating, but it wouldn't be considered a misdemeanor now. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah, just to give you a little historical background on this issue, there are some jurisdictions now, the city of LA being one of them, that would accept a referral for unlicensed practice against a contractor that's under suspension. So what we're looking to do, though, is to clarify in statute that if you're under suspension because you owe a civil judgment, and these would be the significant civil judgments that are out there, or you owe a tax liability like this Champion Construction owes Board of Equalization right now $2.8 million, and they're still out there in public works, and we know there's a lot of judgments for trust funds and other things that exist, and we have subcontractors still working. when the board has said you're suspended and you cannot continue to contract, and you do so because you owe taxes or you owe somebody money, we would like it to be very clear that we can make a referral to a local prosecutor. And so we've worked with the California District Attorneys Association on this issue, and what we're seeking to do is just to clarify, for those two reasons, you'd be subject to a criminal misdemeanor filing as being an unlicensed contractor.
That's pretty clear. Any questions from the board members? The public? All right, do we need a motion on this to pursue this? No?
We do not.
Steve? Okay, all right, so no motion on that item either. And then Laura, I think we have one thing for you to go over here at the end also, on the photos, I think?
Sure, and just before that, just to mention briefly, next year, the board will be going through the sunset review before the legislature, and this is something that generally occurs every 4 years. The board's required to submit a detailed report of lots of statistical information about how the board operates. And then the legislature will hold hearings probably in the spring to review the board. It's an opportunity for the public to comment, interested parties, and then the legislature can choose to extend the board sunset date, or if not, then the board itself would cease to exist, and then it would continue to be run as a program under the Department of Consumer Affairs. So we're currently working on the report, and that is due November 1st to the legislature. Any questions?
Sorry, not on that. Going back to the number 2, Paul, do we need a motion on that, on not including that language in the advertisement?
No, we don't, because.
We're good on that? Okay.
In the last meeting, it was delegated to me, so.
Fell down on the job there. I just was, with the bill that just was, or the concept that was just discussed, the amendments to 7028, just for my clarification on the issue of a motion or not, this is identical to what the board tried to do last year but was unsuccessful. Is that what I'm understanding?
Right. The board previously approved this language, this identical language, and the bill became a 2-year bill, and it was then amended out of that bill, so we're just trying to find a new
So
bill.
we're just finding a new vehicle, so to speak?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, then on to item G2. Do you want me to go over this?
Oh,
one?
yes, please.
Okay, so this is a proposal that has not, at the time we did the packet, has not yet been introduced in legislation, but it's something that's likely to be introduced this year. And it would require photos to be included on the CSLB pocket card, either for all pocket cards or for the B and C licenses. So there's a background paper here that kind of briefly describes the issue and possible costs associated with that, which would be significant, as well as questions the board might want to consider. So we included this in the packet to see if the board would like to take a position on this proposal before it's introduced because of the significant impact it would have on the board.
Well, just to clarify, it's a two-pronged approach. There's the pocket card that would have a photo ID, and then also that it would be posted on the website.
Right, that it would be included on the pocket card, correct, and on the website, which are two separate concerns. At this point, we can't make any modifications to our website because of possible implementations of Breeze. And then once we're online with Breeze, at this point, Breeze is not able to include a photo on the license lookup. So technically, we wouldn't be able to comply with that part of the proposal. And then on the pocket card, right now, we print them in-house, so there would be significant cost to replace the equipment, and then kind of there's the practical question of where it would be located on the pocket card. As you know, it's small, and it comes the one side of the card comes pre-printed to us, so we would need to make additional modifications. And then also, as detailed in here, the average license has 2.5 personnel associated with it. So the question of whose photo is going to be on the pocket card.
Well, to me, it seems like there's actually two discussions to have if it's worth pursuing. One is on the card, which all those issues are valid. You have $330,000 cost. You have who's the half a person that gets their picture on the card. So it's just kind of weird. But on the website, once the technology is there, if your name's on the website, because they have all the different personnel of record, there could be a picture next to each person that just says, here's the person, who the person is. That wouldn't be the big cost, because you don't have to print anything, it would just be posted on the website, so that might be possible, just saying.
Right, there wouldn't be as big a cost, although then we would still have to address how we would get the photo for each licensee and whether, I mean, for our new licensees, they could take the picture when they take the exam, but for all of our existing licensees, would they have to come into the office to get a photo? Would they send one to us that's notarized, so we know it's them? So just lots of practical issues.
Could you get a copy from their DMV, their photo?
The point I'd like to make is, we all have California driver's license in our pocket. If you want to fix this, if somebody has an issue with this, you add to the top of our pocket card, check valid California ID to make sure this person's who they say they are. I mean, that's what people should do anyway. I mean, everyone I've ever talked to, as far as, matter of fact, I was talking to Nancy earlier today. What they would do in the building department was take a photograph of the license, take a photograph of the driver's license. Identified. They know that that's the person legally able to contract in the state of California. So rather than spend all that money and go to all that trouble, and we're having a hard enough time getting fingerprints from people that have already been, licensed in the state of California, why don't we just add a simple line of text to the top of our pocket card, just as a reminder to the homeowner to check valid California ID? Just a thought.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Please. Please state your name, if you don't mind.
Good morning, Richard Markson, Pacific Advocacy Group, representing Western Electrical Contractors, Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California, and the Air Conditioning Trade Association. This strikes me as one of those one-size-fits-all solutions in search of a problem. One thing that occurred to me when I was sitting here listening to this discussion about, and I represent contractors that range in size from 400 employees in California to the sole practitioner. Perhaps what you might consider doing is, if the contractor files the certificate of no employees, then they would have their photo on the ID along with the branding that says that this contractor has no employees and has no workers' compensation policy. If it is a contractor that has a policy on record, that they would not be required to have a photo on the ID card. Just something that occurred to me as I was listening to the discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Hi. Just in response to that, it's such a fluid thing. People that are exempt one day for a certain time of the season, they may, not have a policy then, but they might be adding their policy, and then now we're into having to get another license. That seems like not a feasible issue. But I'm aside from the practicality issues, I think, a good discussion of the feasibility issues is important here. And I think Bob has an excellent idea, but there's other feasibility issues that I'd really like to hear about in terms of what staff thinks. Steve?
Well, Laura made one point, even if you pass a law, we wouldn't be able to implement it. So that's number one. Number two, you have to keep in mind, who are they trying to protect? Okay, typically we're worried about homeowners. Who typically goes to someone's home? It's the employee, it's not the licensee. So where's the bang for the buck? If you're gonna check someone, make sure it's that person, you ask for their driver's license. And that's got the picture. If a criminal's gonna rip off a little old lady in a house, they're gonna make a fake pocket license, it's a well-intended proposal, but it's not practical, and the consumer protection it adds is so minimal, it comes nowhere close to balancing with the cost. I mean, think of how many times we change officers on licensees. I mean, it's Richard said it's a one-size-fits-all, but they're only thinking about one size of license, where that's not what we license, how we license people. It's just not practical. And I think if we do some maybe public affairs, let's educate consumers, check, when someone comes to your home, double check the driver's license, see if that person is named, on the card or whatever. That's much more beneficial than creating a whole new bureaucracy. Remember, the board at its last strategic planning session took an overarching approach that they want to minimize and streamline the licensing process. If we keep adding more and more requirements to getting a license or maintaining a license, we are in fact encouraging more and more people to not follow the law and get in the underground economy. We're not like other licensing groups in the department. Unlicensed contractors can make an illegal living. If you're a doctor, you're not licensed, you can't make a living as an unlicensed doctor. So we're different. So, we all have to keep in mind, we have to simplify and help our licensees in this economy so that we can battle the underground economy. And I think this is another example of making it more complicated for people to get a license in California.
Linda? Oh, sorry. Linda. Go ahead.
I just think, along with the same thought that you're saying, is this would be one of the easiest things to circumvent. I mean, fake IDs are a dime a dozen, and this, in my opinion, would have the opposite effect of actually giving someone kind of now the ability to create a way of validating something that until now they've had to validate otherwise. But now they could just walk in with a picture, with some kind of ID with their picture on it. And it could be stolen, it could be fake, it could be anything. You can't ask homeowners to now validate whether this is an actual DMV license or an actual passport like they have at the airport. So I actually think this could possibly have exactly the opposite effect and make it easier for people to have fake ID.
Thank you. I think long-term technology might help us. I haven't thought this through, but like with the microchips we're going to be having in our credit cards eventually. Every other country in Europe has it to prevent identity theft. Applications on cell phones. I mean, in the 10 years from now, contractors may have an app that would go to our website that would pull up the picture that, you could go to a building department, swipe a card, that would, long term, there will be solutions to this. And of course, being in California, will be 10 years behind Alabama and Louisiana, but I think, we should keep this in mind, but after we get Breeze implemented, we should start looking at, the apps, the microchips in cards in the future. I think we may be able to do something innovative that will deal with this question in the future.
So what we have right now is Laura's included in the package oh, we still have another question?
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of that's actually pretty cheap is just instituting a Q code on the card. You familiar with the Q code? So it's like a UPC, but it's a little box. It's made up of little different designs.
Okay, what's a UPC? Sorry.
When you buy something, it's got a bunch of
Thank you.
barcodes, right?
Okay, there we
So-
go.
It's a thing you can scan with your phone to get one. Yeah.
So anybody with a Q code on their identification, which is just basically could be printed on really easily, a homeowner could use their cell phone, and that could link them back to our website. And it
Well,
wouldn't cost anything more than just the regular ink to print it.
Well, I think what we're going to have, and what Steve's suggesting is there's going to be a conversation to have about all this. And what Laura's done now is just giving us a heads up of something that's coming. And so I don't think there's a motion here to support or not support, because there's nothing to support or not support. She's just giving us a heads up, and staff's not a big advocate of it for a variety of reasons. But there's a whole big conversation to have. I agree.
Could I just ask, where is this proposal coming from?
Assemblyman Jim Frazier, who is a licensed contractor. I believe he holds a B license.
And what, has he had complaints from his constituents or from contractors? Do you know?
I do think it came from either someone a constituent or a friend of his, and concerned about the misuse of a license where an unlicensed individual takes a valid license number and misrepresents himself as that licensee. For this proposal, the board could decide today to take a position on to whether or not to support this. I think the issue with the QR code it's a good one for the board to consider further and for staff to research, but we can consider that separately from this proposal today.
Please, Kevin.
Would it be appropriate for a motion that we oppose or at least do not support this particular bill we expect?
Yes.
So I would make that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. I think that's it. Is that it, Laura? Okay, Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Agenda item H is the licensing committee report. Licensing Chief Karen Robinson and committee chair Frank Shetter will give us this report.
Okay, the License Committee has not held a meeting since our last general meeting. So Karen will present the update for the licensing and testing programs.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, if you look on pages 1 and 2, you'll see the application workload charts. They're broken down in different manners. The first one is the number of applications received per month. We're not seeing any big change. Things are staying pretty flat, but keep in mind, for 2013-14, we're just now going into what are historically our busiest months, so we may see a little uptick there by our June meeting. The next chart is a comparison of applications received per quarter. The first quarter of this fiscal year, we saw a very slight increase. Second quarter, a very slight decrease, so it looks like we're still kind of flat in that regard as well. On page 2, you have the total number of applications received per month, broken down, by month, obviously, and you'll see the various fiscal years. In red is the current fiscal year that we're in now. Not a big change there either. And then finally, the last chart shows the number of applications received, and this is broken down by the type of application. So our original exam applications are first, then our waivers, the ad class, and finally the replacing the qualifier. And again, we're not seeing any drastic changes there. On pages 3 and 4, our stats on the limited liability company. No big surprises here either. We're still seeing a high number of rejects for these applications. We've tried to get the word out. We've tried to explain, here are the biggest problems. Here's why they're being rejected, but we're not seeing much of a change. So we're going to work with PAO and brainstorm to see if there's any other things that we might be able to do to assist these people in getting their applications in correctly. Since we implemented this, we've issued 453 limited liability company licenses. On pages 5 and 6 is the workers' compensation recertification program. It took effect in January of 2012. We implemented it with our renewals in March of 2013. On page 5, those are the renewal applications that we mail each month, and it's broken down by those who don't require recertification and those who do. And then on page 6 is a chart that shows of those that required recertification, how many we were able to process, how many we rejected, and I'm happy to say that, as you'll see, the vast majority of them we are able to process because they are recertifying. Page 7 is the disposition of applications by fiscal year. It just shows for the last 5 fiscal years where applications stand, whether they have been issued, voided, or continued to be pended. Obviously, the more recent years are going to show more still pending. They're maybe waiting to take an exam, or they might be out to investigation. There can be a number of reasons for that. our application processing route. Everyone's familiar with that, I'm certain. Then on pages 9 and 10, fingerprinting criminal background unit. That's been in place since 2005. It seems to run quite smoothly. You've got the stats on the total number of records that we receive from the Department of Justice, how many of those have a hit, meaning they have a criminal conviction, are denials, appeals, and then the probationary licenses issued. Pages 10 and 11, our licensing information center, also referred to as our call center. They are continuing to exceed the board goals. The board goal has been answering 80% of the calls within 4 minutes or less. As you can see here, the call wait times average 2 minutes and 11 seconds, with 97% of the calls being answered. We can attribute those increased statistics or better looking statistics to the fact that we've really kept our staffing levels good. Again, though, as I have to report, last time we were fully staffed. Now we've lost another person, so we're recruiting for that position now. And unfortunately, I must report today that our manager of the call center, who has just done a phenomenal job, got snatched up by the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. So now we're losing him. So for a while, I guess I'll be the call center manager until we can get somebody else in place. I mean, we're very happy for him. It's a great opportunity, but it's going to be very difficult for us to have to replace him. The statistical data for the call center can be found on page 11. It'll just show our average wait time, which has just been excellent. Calls answers, calls abandoned. Really good news there as well. Then our judgment unit, which handles all outstanding liabilities, judgments, bond payment of claims. Their statistics are showed on page 13, 14, and 15. They're broken down by the type of liability. The first is the outstanding liabilities, which is basically information we receive from EDD, Department of Industrial Relations, Franchise Tax Board, or our own cashiering unit. And then you have judgments. Those obviously are matters that have been litigated. A judgment's been issued against the contractor. We've been advised of that outstanding judgment, and we act accordingly. And under each chart that shows the workload statistics, you'll also see the savings that we have given the public by kind of being the middleman in getting this money paid. The final chart shows a total of all of those types of judgments, outstanding liabilities, and bond payment of claims, and you can see we're instrumental in helping to collect millions and millions of dollars. Finally, on pages 16 through 19, this is our timelines for polling workload. This illustrates from the time an application, broken down by the type of application, walks into our door, how long it is before somebody polls it for processing. We do see spikes or peaks and valleys, and there are a number of reasons that can be attributed to that, oftentimes depending on the time of year, if it's holidays. In certain areas, you really only have one staff member responsible for this workload, so if that person is sick or on vacation, you might see a spike. But we tend to keep pretty close to the processing guidelines that we're looking for. Clearly, we have certain areas that we think are the priorities, such as renewals. That is our number one priority. New applications for new licenses, getting people out there to work. Not to say that we don't take all of this seriously and want to get things done as quickly as possible, but we do pay special attention to renewals and applications. That's the licensing part. I don't know if there's any questions on the licensing program from board members or, no? Good. Okay, so testing. Page 1 of testing is the examination administration unit. The testing division, exam administration unit is responsible for administering all of the exams at our 8 computer-based centers. They administer 45 different exams. The first chart shows the number of examinations scheduled between January of 2013 and December 2013, so an entire calendar year. It's broken down by month and includes all 8 test centers. The testing centers are listed just below that. Then the next page has stats broken down by each test center and how many applications were scheduled during that same time period.
Karen, could I ask questions as you go? Is that okay?
Sure.
Ask as you go. Is the trend that you see on the first page there of the examinations, is they're falling throughout 2013? Is that the normal trend? Big in January, low in December?
You know what, I would have to get back to you on that, Paul. I don't really oversee this division, but I will check with Wendy. I think we've stayed, well, the testing often is tied to what we're seeing in the application unit. If things are going up there, then testing, a couple months down the road, we'll see an increase. If things are staying pretty flat in applications, testing will stay, basically the same. But I will check with Wendy and see if those, if those stats are comparative to, say, what we saw last calendar year.
I'm just wondering if we're increasing or decreasing the number of licensed contractors out there in California, what the trend is. That's all I was looking for.
Yeah,
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, I'll look into that. So we have, by test center, the number of exams scheduled during this time period. Obviously, Norwalk is by far the busiest testing center. Then on page 3 is our examination development unit. They're responsible for developing all those exams that we're giving at these test centers. Again, we have 45 examinations that are written, maintained, and updated in accordance with the testing standards, and this is done by our staff along with the help of industry experts. And you'll see a chart down there of what's in progress right now. The occupational analysis in progress, that's kind of the beginning step. You go out and survey the profession that you're looking at and get all their answers back on the various KSAs and develop your exam blueprint. Then you move on to the new exams in process. We get our subject matter experts together. They write the examination questions. They're tested for validity. We've also, or the testing division has also been instrumental in helping with civil service examinations, including the examinations that are kind of specific to the contractor's board, like our enforcement rep, but they've also conducted one for the consumer service representative classification as well. And then finally, I'll just note that we do have a new testing chief. She was the acting division chief, Wendy Balvens. She's been with the board for 28 years. I've had the pleasure of working with her quite often. She's extremely competent, and I think is going to make a great chief of the testing division. And that's all I have for those reports.
Any comments from the board?
Well, I have a big mouth. So, I worked on the C51 test 5 years ago, before I was on the board. And so I was one of the experts that called in to help put the test together. Anyway, the test back then, it was, Ken Boyd did a wonderful job. It was a great experience, learned a lot about how we put them together. My son is taking a class right now, it's called Applied Science. And in this class, Applied Science, they're taking AutoCAD, and they're starting to include that in the education process for kids, and how they work off of grid lines, and how you put together a building, or any type of 3D model design. Is that yet being included in the testing that we have for our licensees?
I don't know, Steve, maybe you,
Well, usually CAD is more architecture, engineering. If the way tests are developed, they look at what, well, you know, you
Well, it's
did
not-
it.
Not anymore, though.
Well, no-
That's but it's not architecture and engineering anymore in steel, and I would venture to say in electrical and plumbing, it's the same, where, no, you're working, there's this thing called BIM modeling now, Building Information Management, where these drawings are all coming together where, whether it's plumbing, mechanical, steel, you need to know how to work in and out of these AutoCAD drawings. It's very different than it was 5 years ago.
What I was going to add was that, and you having developed exams, if things like that are being utilized in the field, they would typically become part of the occupational analysis, which then translates into exam questions. So if that is what's happening in the field, it should be part of the exam. That's something we can have Wendy look into. In fact, every 3 or 4 years, we like to have the testing chief review the whole exam development process with the board. Now that we have some new board members, it might be time to have Wendy explain how exams are developed, and you can ask her these types of questions. She's really the only one that could probably answer it. So if you'd like, maybe at the June board meeting, I could have, probably the next board meeting here in Sacramento. In Sacramento, we'll have Wendy give a briefing on how exams are developed and administered.
I'd like to make a comment. That is absolutely true. Every single mechanical system, the architectural, the structural, is always modeled now on the larger projects, and it's a requirement that it's done. And if they're not able to do it, then they have to sub that part of it out, and it never works as well. It's always better if you have somebody who actually has the experience of a contractor to perform that type of work, and it's a skill that has to be learned. I had to learn it myself, actually, in my trade, so.
I was a BIM modeler back, started in '97 with sheet metal, so it's been out since then, or way before then, actually. So all the 3D, the collision detecting, all that, it's all part of our trade now. We train to it. All our guys work on it, so yeah, it's something maybe we should really look into.
My only comment about that would be that it's really a specialty in a lot of the different crafts. And the basic installation that we're testing for right now would not be affected by this, by the CAD. I mean, from my own personal experience as a contractor, I know I have employees that specifically do that. And to be totally familiar with a CAD system, be able to do BIM modeling, you have to be an expert. And I think that's probably beyond what we would want to test for. I don't know about structural steel, but certainly in a lot of the other crafts, it would be almost a separate expertise all on its own, at least in my opinion. Hearing none, that's our report.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Karen. Moving to agenda item I, the Executive Committee report. Cindy Christensen will provide this report.
Thank you, Joan. On page 1, you see the personnel update, and as Karen explained, we do have state examinations that we're giving constantly for the classifications we hire at the Contractors Board, and this allows us to get individuals from outside of the state, other departments, as well as promote our internal staff. She also spoke about Wendy being promoted, and from November through February, we had 5 transfers within CSLB, 9 transfers from other state departments, 6 promotions, and 4 new hires. We also encourage training and development assignments, and what that helps is that maybe a person cannot qualify for a certain classification that typically happens in our enforcement representative series, so they really don't have the experience. So what it does is they might be in the staff service analyst position, which is more administrative, and while they do that training and development assignment, they gain the experience so they can qualify to take the examination. And so that really assists us in getting good staff down the road. On page 2, it shows you the position vacancies, and we pretty much hold steady at 40.5 positions, with the majority of those being in, vacancies being in enforcement. As far as facilities, we're still getting close to moving our Oakland office to Berkeley. That date keeps getting pushed out. Right now, we're at March. Contracts and procurement, we have a few contracts ongoing. We also have a few vacancies within our IWAS unit. And we also have training and development. We do have one staff person who tracks all of the training for CSLB employees. And that also includes our mandatory training, which gets to be quite a nightmare when we have our sexual harassment prevention training and the ethics training for some of us. Records management, we continue to purge files. And with fleet, we don't have anything to report there. And we also have an emergency response team that meets annually to, in the event of a disaster at CSLB. Any questions on that? On the information technology update on the next page, Breeze is ongoing. Some of you may have read that there are problems if you're in the Sacramento area. There was an article in the Bee that indicated that there were problems at the nursing board because there were nurses aren't getting their licenses as fast because they're not able to process them as fast. It's pretty much just, it happens with every new system that's implemented. Apparently it happened here when they went from a manual to an electronic system, and it's getting better. Most of the boards, it's working pretty good, and it seems to be like the nursing board, they're getting enough resources to assist them in getting that backlog taken care of. And hopefully all these little bugs will be worked out by the time CSLB goes on with Breeze. And right now, we really don't have a release date as far as when we'll be going. I've heard that it's 2015, but I think with everything, they want to make sure that every release that comes up in the near future, that they give themselves enough time to properly work the bugs out instead of rolling out a new phase right away. They want to give a little time, fix the bugs out, and then go into the next phase. Our partner agency disclosure project, that's still ongoing with between IT and with enforcement. There were a few little bugs, but those have been worked out. On page 2, our IT service desk report, and as you see, since we have most of the staff in Sacramento, that's where the majority of their assistance is required. Our interactive voice response system, this is our table on page 3, gives you the top 20, and you'll see that the top one is contractor or wanting to become a contractor. On page 4, you see the graph of the top IVR requests from November 13 to January 2014. And then on page 5, this is just kind of an interesting chart. It seems to change weekly, but this is our firewall hits where people are trying to hack into our system. When this was printed, it seems like most of them come from the United States. A few weeks ago, they were all coming from France, so it seems to change almost on a weekly basis, but it's kind of interesting. Any questions on IT?
Is there any information on what information they're trying to obtain? When they try to hack you?
I don't know. I can check with our IT chief.
That's interesting.
I think they're just
license
trying to break
information?
in to see what's there and see, they can get something, yeah. Yeah.
They can tell by the IP address where the initial contact, where they pinged their server from, that's what they're tracking there.
Well, I mean, is there a potential concern with some sort of security information someone would have on their application, or?
There's always concerns that somebody could hack in, but I guess what this report shows is where they're coming from, and our firewall is able to stop it.
Good, so, great.
Isn't the bulk of the information public anyway?
I think Linda just asked if most of the information is public anyway. Some of the information is not that we keep on there, for instance, like social security numbers of applicants and birth dates. Next is the budget update. We're pretty much on track at this point in time. Through December, we've spent approximately 50% of our budget, so that's where we anticipated being. Revenue, we really haven't experienced much of a change from last year to this year. So I really don't have anything major to report there. On page 2, it talks about the fund condition, which projects our fund condition out through 2015-16. And at this point, because we're not spending all of our money each year and able to roll that money forward, we probably won't need a fee increase for several years. As David reported earlier, we did get the budget change proposal for his subsequent arrest unit approved. I think it took us 7 years to get that through, but it finally got through, and now it just has to go through the legislative budget committees for final approval. And let's see, the construction management education account on page 3, that is getting pretty low, as you'll see. If we keep spending like we are, we'll go negative. So after next year, what'll happen is we'll just wait to award some of those grants until it builds up to an adequate amount, and then continue with awarding those grants. And then on the next page is this, any question on the budget?
I just had a question. I noticed that the change from the prior year at the bottom is actually minus 1%, so we're very close. But the license and renewal fees have fallen off almost 4%, and it looks like the delinquent renewal fees and the penalty assessments, so kind of the fines part of our business or our budget has gone up substantially. I mean, 30% on the penalty assessments and 17% on delinquent renewal fees. Is that just coincidence? Yeah,
Well, there's a couple of things to keep in mind, and renewals are every 2 years. And back in the 80s or early 90s, there was an amnesty where all these people could get their licenses. So one of the years, we have more people getting renewed than the next. So every other year, the renewal goes up. It's not, it bumps up and down. So that's probably why the renewal's down this year. It'll probably be up 4% from this year. Yeah, but why the delinquents are up, maybe it's just the economy and people, weren't getting to it as quickly, but I don't know why that would have gone up. Karen, you got any insight on that, or?
I do not know why delinquents went up. I would guess that, yeah, it probably is the economy. Some didn't renew, didn't have jobs going, and then got a job and decided to go ahead and renew them and paid the delinquency fee.
That could be also more effective enforcement, might
Yeah,
be a
that's-
reason too. I mean, look at all the enforcement that you're doing in terms of, when you read this report that you'll be going over shortly, it's pretty amazing what's happening out there, and I kind of think this may be a direct result of that. Not that we necessarily want to get our funds from the negative side of the ledger as opposed to the positive side of the ledger, but it does mean that we are enforcing and collecting, which should ultimately make people more compliant, I would think. 'Cause it's expensive not to be.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it is good.
Sorry.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. And then on the following page, we have our statistical summary. And what I wanted to point out, I think, Paul, you had asked a question about the original licenses issued. And this kind of does tell you they are, what our trend is. They are kind of dropping a little bit. Like from last year to this year, they've dropped about 10%. So I think maybe what I might add in here is another table that shows how many examinations we're giving, just to see if there's any correlation.
Well, it looks like applications received from 12 and 13 were 15,300, and then 13, 14, 16,000. Is 13, 14 done?
No, that'll be done in June 30th.
So we'll have a lot more applications
Yes.
this year relative to last year. So fewer licenses issued, but there's a delay, there's a lag, right? So it looks like we're actually.
It should be from, if they took it from December, well, I'll have to check when they were taking their numbers, because the way that this chart should be reading, it should be from December 31st, 12-13, and then December 31st, 13-14. But I'll check with with Stacy, our analyst to see where she's actually getting these numbers from.
I mean, they look like apples to apples right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's July through December for those
Yeah.
sections, sorry. Looks like apples to apples
Oh, you
now.
are? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
got it. Yeah, you're right. So there is a drop. So any questions on the statistical summary? The next item is the review and approval of the 2014 Board Member Administrative Procedure Manual. This manual was reviewed and approved by the Executive Committee. They recommended that it move forward to the full board but first to have legal counsel take a look at it and our Public Affairs Office take a look at it for technical changes. There were very minor changes made in this manual. It's really nice. We do it once a year just because it's kind of a refresher to show what your roles and responsibilities are as board members, your training, and also how the board operates.
Any board member comments? Any public comment on this item? I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the 2014 Board Member Administrative Procedural Manual.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
The next item is the review of the 2013 Accomplishments and Activities Report. And always amazed at how much we do throughout the year. And at this point, I'll just open it up to if there's any questions or comments.
May I make a comment, Madam Chair?
Please.
I
Please.
think I have it on.
Board Member Clifford.
I found this amazing. I actually read it and shared it with a number of people that said, that I know sit on boards and said, how would you feel if you actually got to publish a report that got this much done? I mean, things are really happening, so I not only thought it was amazing reading, and it was really engaging the way it was done, but I want to compliment the way it was put together. There were pictures and graphs at the right place that really helped you understand, and it was actually good reading. So I didn't use this at night to go to bed at all. I mean, I actually... Right. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Anyway, just congratulations to the staff and the board on getting all this. This is cool.
I just had one more comment on this. When we put this in the board packet, it was a draft version, and we did receive some comments and suggestions from board members and other staff, and so they have been incorporated, and I believe it's been finalized, Rick? Yes, and is that, Linda was asking earlier too, if that is sent out to legislators and, do you know?
We typically, we send it to the B and P committees that have our oversight, and to the administration, the governor's office, agency, and we send it out to our industry representatives. So maybe a couple hundred people in electronic form.
Fantastic.
Okay, so the next item, let you get there, is the status of the 2013-14 strategic plan objectives. And these came from the last strategic planning meeting last April. The first one, kind of broken down into units, testing and licensing. First objective, to develop language for the establishment of an asbestos abatement specialty classification. We're targeting completion June 2013. The language has been completed and approved by the board, and we'll be having a regulatory hearing set in March. And then the final approval by the board will be expected by April, in the April meeting, and then from there it'll go to the Office of Administrative Law, agency, and Department of Consumer Affairs for final approval. Next one is increase high-tech security monitoring and test centers. We're targeting December 2014 for that. And they are in the process between testing and our IT department to identify, purchase, and install security cameras in all of our test centers. Next one is to develop an online smart application process to reduce application decline rates. That is tied to our Breeze project, so that's on hold. The next one is to evaluate the productivity of the CSLB's Licensing Information Center and determine if changes are needed. There was a study conducted, recommendations have been made, and we'll be implementing those, and one of those is to change some of the coding for the call system. That should be completed by April 2013.
14.
I'm sorry, yeah, 14, thank you. We're already done. And then fully automate bonds and workers' compensation insurance submission processes. Again, that's tied to the Breeze project. Number 6 is expand license application video to other languages. They're anticipating July 2015 for that. And right now, they're working with Public Affairs to identify what languages we would like to translate and determine if we need to get a vendor to come in and help us translate those, that video. Number 7 is inform applicants about the top reasons applications are rejected. That is completed. It's included online, and it's also included in our completing a contractor's license application video. Number 8 is establish a task force to analyze the application process and reduce rejection rates. That's ongoing, and we have a target date of January 2015. And it looks like we'll be studying that beginning in March. Next one is on hold with Breeze, and that's to get an online payment tool for credit cards. For enforcement, they are updating the industry expert training program. They're targeting the third quarter of this fiscal year, and that's in progress. Number 2 is provide for the disclosure of partnering agencies' action on the CSLB website. As you're aware, that's completed. Third one is partnering with California Energy Commission to create an energy efficiency campaign. They're working on that, and that will launch in March. Fourth one is address enforcement vacancies in hard-to-fill geographic areas. They have hired investigators to work in San Luis Obispo, Butte, and Stanislaus counties. One thing, Steve and Laura and I visited the San Francisco office yesterday, and this area is hard to recruit, and probably the main reason is just the high cost of living. They get the same pay as somebody in Fresno or Sacramento, and it was very eye-opening for us in terms of what they have to do just to get to work, and it's a good group here. Next one is to develop criteria and controls to monitor and prioritize proactive enforcement. That's been completed. Automate an official education letter to consumers who repeatedly hire unlicensed operators. They're targeting, that was submitted to the Enforcement Committee October 24th, and staff is currently working with IT to automate that letter. And then, of course, we'll have the pilot study for the Enforcement Citizen Patrol, and I think I missed one. But that one's in Butte County. They're starting it. The one up above that is prioritize enforcement case based on the potential harm to the public, and that's been completed. Public Affairs, they are migrating the CSLB's website to the new California standards. Hopefully, it's indicated early, that'll be done soon. They've done a great job of getting a multimedia unit. We're now able to do all of our own video productions and have our meetings webcasted. Number 3, they are ongoing completion of creating an archive of consumer stories so that they can use those for outreach and education. They're completing the flagship contractor and consumer publications. They've also they put this one on hold to develop a contractor presentation kit. And one thing they're also working on is to develop a CSLB style guide and brand standards manual. Legislation, Laura went pretty much over that. Big thing we're gearing up for is the sunset review. And for IT and admin, the biggest one will be just getting our staff ready to implement Breeze. And the last one is, well, we've pretty much completed that. That's to create a subsequent arrest unit through the budget change proposal process.
I'd just like to comment for the 4 members that have joined our board since our last strategic planning meeting. You know, in each of these divisions, you can see these great number of ideas and objectives we come up with as board members at our strategic planning meeting in April, and under each division. And it's just amazing to me the amount of work this is that this CSLB staff is able to complete and pull off every year. That's why these strategic planning meetings are so important, and they attend them, all the chiefs, attend them with us, and it's just an amazing, so, just to piggyback on what Linda said, Linda Clifford, on the accomplishments and activities, it's just an amazing amount of work, and really kudos go out to all the staff and all the employees at the CSLB. So, thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, I think the other important thing too, it really helps us, focus throughout the year. And then, being very successful out there, we have a lot of external agencies that are out constantly asking us for help. And this helps us say, well, no, we can't do it. We have this other priority right now we're working on. So it really does help us in prioritizing too as well. So the next one is the review of the 2014-15 strategic planning process. That will take place at our April 22nd, 23rd board meeting in San Diego. And the schedule is here for your review. Currently, Solid, who is Tom Roy, who helped out last year, he'll be attending, and he'll be the leader of our strategic planning session. And they just sent out a survey to all staff, and it just kind of assesses, what's the morale out there, so that it'll assist us going through the strategic planning process. And then they'll be meeting with senior staff at the end of February to kind of put together, what are some bullet points we need to start thinking about prior to the strategic planning meeting. And then they'll be sending you shortly an email invitation so that you can get prepared for your individual phone interviews. And then they'll kind of compile those and then get all the handouts ready, and then we'll go for our planning session. Any questions? That's it.
Excellent job, Cindy. Thank you so much. That was lengthy, full,
Sorry.
and very, no.
I'm
it's
usually
just
not very lengthy.
Well done, very well done. All right, agenda item K, J, tentative schedule, Cindy.
The next meeting will be April 23rd, 24th, I missed the dates, in San Diego, and that will be our mainly strategic planning. We'll have very little business conducted at that meeting, only the necessary action items. And then June 6th will be in Newport Beach, and that will be a joint meeting with the Nevada Board.
And at this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn, unless there's any further comments from board members.
Second.
We're adjourned, thank you.